It was a sunny fall day, perfect for a bike ride, and I was near Science World. I noticed a group of people at the overpass with flags. And from a distance, it had the vibe of a post-game victory celebration. I could see red and green in the flags, so assumed Italy had won something I wasn't aware of. Occasionally, a car would honk, and the group would swell with enthusiasm. It was October the 8th. As I got closer, I saw that the flag was Palestinian, and there was a large Free Palestine banner, and I wondered, what happened in Palestine? People didn't seem angry, so maybe it was something good. I got home and looked at the news, stunned to learn that a brutal massacre had taken place inside of Israel, that Hamas had broken through the border, invaded and targeted civilians at a music festival and a kibbutz. The number of dead was unimaginable. Women and children had been taken hostage into Gaza, images of terrified faces, and the bloody sweatpants we will never scrub from our memories. I realized what I had seen on the street. I was shocked, completely disoriented, and scared. This made no sense. I immediately texted my closest Jewish friends. I've heard, I'm here, I'm thinking of you. Israel had not yet counted the dead. The number of hostages was unknown, and in the town where I lived, peoples immediately took to the streets to respond, not with compassion for the victims, not with condemnation of terrorism, and not with the normal human decency I would expect, but what looked like to me like a victory march. As days passed and the sickening details were revealed, things went from bad to worse. I saw my friends posting photos from Free Palestine rallies, while never once acknowledging the massacre victims or hostages. I saw leaders in the progressive left with huge platforms and influence use social media to declare that 10/7 was resistance. Some were calling Israel's response a genocide within the first week. I saw post after post in my feed hurling the insult of white apartheid colonizer settler at a nation made up of refugees from Africa, surrounding Arab countries, and Europe. They tripped over themselves to demonize every action taken by Israel, while sparing not a thought for the victims of 10/7, the dead, the families of the dead, and those still in captivity. This generation's blood libel on the Jews was on full display. When organizations started making public statements condemning Israel, I would respond, asking them to call for the release of the hostages or condemn the attack. Apparently, this was too much to ask because my emails went unanswered. I thought I lived in a world where people would go crazy in the face of children being taken hostage, where people would talk of nothing else and be glued to the TV for news alerts and updates on the hostages. I thought I lived in a world where every heart would hope and pray for their return. And then when the news of the sexual torture and rapes came out, I watched the feminists turn their backs. I realized I was living at the crossroads of Me Too hypocrites, performative white saviors, and Hamas apologists. I came to understand that the progressive left had no compassion, no regard for Israelis, no regard for their Jewish friends and neighbors, and the grief and fear and pain they were going through, because most Jews in Canada have ties to Israel, whether it be family or friends or just the knowledge that it exists as the one sovereign Jewish state in the world. And in the days following 10/7, I found out that the most barbaric acts I had ever witnessed in my life were justified as a legitimate form of resistance. And I understood that the left was incapable of seeing any Israeli as innocent. The fabric of my cherished beliefs about the political company I had kept for my entire life was torn and began to unravel bit by bit with each passing day. Struggling to make sense of it, I recalled how Western feminists used the term rape culture when Brett Kavanaugh made it onto the Supreme Court, but remained silent and outright denied the truth when they encountered the literal rape culture of Hamas. I remembered how The Pulse nightclub shooting in the US, the queer community of the world cried on each other's shoulders for weeks and comforted each other, but seemed entirely unmoved by the massacre of young people at the Nova Festival. I had spent nearly 40 years inside a politic that told me I should be outraged by microaggressions, but now it seemed to be fangirling for jihadists. I had been told that all people deserved a safe space, but now watched the progressive left refuse to acknowledge the existence of children and old people taken as hostage. I was told that misgendering someone was an act of violence, but a massacre was an inevitable response to oppression. I had been expected to cancel people for the slightest transgressions of speech that could be perceived as even slightly hurtful, but now it was A-OK to say, by any means necessary, globalize the Intifada, or chant River to the Sea, even after your Jewish friends explained that to them it meant eradicate the state of Israel. All the progressive left had to do was consistently condemn the attack and call for the release of the hostages. But no, they told me they were so dedicated to Palestinian lives that they would go to any length to stop the war, take any risk, except humanize Jews. They would march in the streets, boycott Israel, sacrifice friendships, cancel events, terrorize synagogues and hospitals, but not that. Calling for the release of hostages was just too much to ask. It has become obvious that their need to villainize Israel is stronger than their desire to save Palestinian lives. And I am convinced that one day in the future it will be clear that the response of the Western left needlessly prolonged the war and resulted in the deaths of the people they sought to advocate for. Had the entire world rallied to pressure Hamas to release the hostages quickly, this would have ended very differently for everyone involved. And so here's where I've landed. After a lifetime of progressive activism, my core values have not changed. But the extreme left demonizes Israel and Jews by association, and the extreme right demonizes Jews and Muslims. We must strengthen the center, or these extremists on both sides will get us all killed. I leave you with a few words from my recent trip to Israel. First of all, everywhere I went, I told people about you, and they were so impressed and so grateful because these events are not happening everywhere. So I want you to know that. This is much appreciated. On October 7th, we saw the very worst of humanity, but in Israel, I saw the very best of humanity in Jews, Muslims, and Christians. I saw incredible heroism in the Bedouin men that I met that ran directly into danger on 10/7 to save the lives of strangers, and in the volunteers who work with United Hatzalah, who rushed in without any protection to provide medical first response. I found incredible strength and resolve in hostage families, committed not only to bring their own people home, but all the hostages. I found immeasurable courage in IDF soldiers, including Arab Israelis that serve proudly in the IDF, even though they are not required to in order to protect the country they call home. And I met open-hearted, peaceful Israelis and Palestinians that are working together toward coexistence with their neighbors, even if they risk being considered traitors in their own communities. And I would say to you, if you have the ability, go to Israel. Go and visit, volunteer at one of the many, many opportunities to support farms, to support displaced families, or just go and visit. People are so grateful just to see anybody visiting there and that the world has not turned their back. Bring them home now. Thank you.